The first time she warned me, I thought it was a joke. We were crammed into the back of a market stall on Vera Station, an orbital city stitched together from old war hulls and new alloy, forever smelling like hot metal and sweet spice. Outside, the bazaar roared, merchants shouting in 3 languages, drones humming low, children laughing as they chased light fish holograms through the air. Inside the stall, it was dim, quiet, and strangely cold. The woman across from me sat with her hands folded as if she owned the silence. She wore a plain traveler's cloak, the kind that hid your face from cameras and your posture from questions. Her hair was dark, cut straight at the shoulders, her eyes silver, almost reflective, watched me like I was a doorway. I was only there because a friend from the Port Authority had slid me a note that morning. Need you, private translation, high pay, no questions. I should have said no. I should have remembered that I had, in fact, survived 2 years in diplomatic logistics by saying no at exactly the right times. But my rent was due, my contract was expiring, and my pride was tired of being poor. So I sat there with my battered translation tablet and an unconvincing calm and waited for someone important to walk in. Instead, this woman smiled, small and precise, like she had practiced it in front of a mirror, and said softly, "Be careful, human." Her accent was perfect, too perfect. "I beg your pardon," I asked. She leaned forward just enough that the light caught her eyes. "Be careful," she repeated, "because you are speaking to me as if I am just any woman." I let out a breath that was half laugh, half confusion. "Aren't you?" For a heartbeat, she didn't move. Then she smiled again, but this time it carried weight. It was the smile of someone who had never been forced to explain herself. "I'm the queen," she said, like it was a fact as ordinary as gravity. "And I chose you." I stared. There are moments when the mind tries to protect you by pretending it didn't hear what it heard. It offers alternatives: misheard, metaphor, joke, scam, hallucination brought on by cheap station air. My mind offered all of them in rapid succession. Then a soft chime sounded from somewhere inside her cloak. A signal. A coded tone that my tablet immediately recognized and flashed with a warning: authorized Crown Channel. Encryption, royal grade. The laugh died in my throat. My hands suddenly felt too large and too clumsy for my own body. "Your Majesty," I managed, as if the words were borrowed from someone more capable. Her gaze did not soften. If anything, it sharpened with relief, as if she had been waiting for me to finally see the line between us. "Yes," she said. "Now you understand why I told you to be careful." Outside, the market noise swelled. Someone laughed. Someone dropped something glassy and it shattered. Life kept moving, indifferent. Inside the stall, the air became a tightrope. I tried to stand. My knee caught on a crate, and for a second my dignity and I both considered dying right there. She lifted a hand. "Sit," she said. It wasn't harsh. It wasn't loud. It was simply obeyed. I sat. My mouth opened and closed once, useless as a fish. I don't understand. Why are you here on Vera Station?" "Unannounced?" She tilted her head slightly. "Unannounced to whom?" "To everyone," I swallowed. "Your court, your guards, your people." "Ah," she gave a small nod, like a teacher acknowledging a student's attempt. "My people know many things, but there are some truths that must be carried quietly or they break in the hands of those who hold them." That was not an answer. That was a warning wrapped in poetry. I forced myself to focus. "Your Majesty, with respect, why me? I'm a contract translator. I handle shipping disputes and medical forms and the occasional immigration hearing." Her eyes stayed on mine, unblinking. "You also stopped a fight 3 days ago at Dock 9. My throat tightened. That was nothing. It had been something. A minor scuffle between a human freight handler and a Kathiri dockworker. The Kathiri were tall, jointed wrong at the elbows, with a cultural pride that did not mesh well with human impatience. The freight handler had called him a name, the Kathiri had grabbed him by the collar, and suddenly there were fists and claws and the smell of blood. I had stepped between them before I could think. Put my hands up, palms open. Spoken softly in Kathiri dialect, broken but honest. Said the handler was afraid and ashamed. Said the Kathiri was proud and provoked. Said neither of them wanted to be arrested and deported over a stupid word. They had stopped, not because I was strong. Because I was stupid enough to be gentle in a place that rewarded force. "I watched," she said. "You were there," I blurted. "Not as you would imagine." Her smile flickered. "I have eyes in many places, human, and I do not mean cameras." That sent a cold ripple through me. "So you saw me and decided what? That I'd make a good employee." Her fingers tapped once against her own wrist, an absent, controlled motion. "Not employee." The way she said it made my skin prickle. "What then?" She held my gaze like it was a blade she'd decided not to swing. "A choice," she said. "A risk, a hope. Hope from a queen directed at me. My brain tried again to offer alternatives, delusion, trap. Then the back flap of the stall rustled. Two figures stepped in so silently I only noticed them because the temperature dropped. They wore black armor shaped like a second skin, matte and without insignia. Their helmets were smooth, featureless, until thin lines of light crawled across them like veins. They didn't look at me, they looked at her. One went to one knee, the other stayed standing but bowed their head. "Your Majesty," they said in unison. My stomach sank as if it had been waiting for proof. The queen didn't acknowledge them with words. She simply breathed once slow and the two guards became still, like statues that had decided to be human again. She turned back to me. "Now," she said, "you will listen." I nodded because my body had made the decision for me. "There is a summit," she continued. "2 days from now on my world." My mouth went dry. "Your world is closed to most outsiders." "Yes," her expression hardened, "and yet I am opening the doors because we are dying quietly." The word dying did not match her posture. She looked like the kind of person who could stand on a crumbling bridge and tell it to hold. "We have enemies," she said, "not all of them outside our borders." My mind whispered. She didn't say the word, she didn't have to. "My council believes a human presence will look weak," she continued. "They believe opening our gates will invite exploitation. They are not entirely wrong." I licked my lips. "And you want me there to translate?" "Yes," she paused, "and no." I felt my pulse in my throat. "My people respect contracts," she said. "They respect lineage, duty, and the old bloodlines that built our empire. But there is one thing we respect above all, even if we pretend we do not." She leaned forward again and the stall seemed to shrink around her. "Choice," she said. "When a ruler chooses publicly and without coercion, it becomes law with the force of myth." I didn't like where this was going. "You chose me," I said carefully. "Yes, to translate, to stand beside me," she corrected. My chest tightened. "Your Majesty, be careful," she said, and this time there was steel under it. "You are about to reject something without understanding the cost." I swallowed. "What cost?" Her eyes softened only a fraction, but enough to be dangerous. "Mine." Silence pulsed between us. Outside, a vendor shouted, a child laughed, somewhere a ship's engines flared. Inside, my entire life bent around a single sentence. "I am to be what?" I asked, voice barely steady. "A symbol, a partner," she said, and the word landed heavier than any title. "In public, in law, in story." I stared at her. "You're asking me to be your consort." She did not flinch. "I am asking you," she said, "to be the human I chose." There were 100 reasons to say no, 1,000, politics, safety, the sheer insanity of it. And there was one reason my mouth went numb with fear, because if she was serious, then someone powerful wanted her dead for even offering. "I don't know you," I whispered. Her smile returned, softer now. "Then learn." One of the guards shifted, and I realized he had been watching me all along, not with hostility, but with a kind of measured curiosity. The queen's gaze followed my flicker of attention and returned to my face. "You are afraid," she said. "Yes." "Good," she sat back. "It means you understand that this is real." I dragged a hand through my hair. "Why not choose someone from your world, someone trained for this, someone who won't embarrass you?" Her eyes narrowed. "Because they would not be a choice, they would be an arrangement. My council would accept it, my rivals would ignore it, it would change nothing." She paused. The words that followed came quieter. "And because they would not see me as a person." The stall was so still that I could hear my own breathing. "I saw you," she said. "At Dock 9, you did not see species, you did not see status. You saw two frightened beings making themselves cruel because they didn't know what else to do." My throat tightened. "You stepped between them," she continued, "and offered your hands empty, not submission, not threat, empty." Her eyes shimmered like metal in light. "That is rare among rulers," she said. "And rarer among those who are ruled." I didn't know how to respond, so I asked the only practical question left in my brain. "What happens if I refuse?" Her expression didn't change, but something behind it dimmed. "Then I go to the summit alone," she said. "My council tightens their grip, the factions that oppose me grow bolder, the doors close again, the war that approaches becomes inevitable. War, actual war, not the bureaucratic kind I dealt with in paperwork. The kind with ships and fire and bodies." "You're putting a lot on me," I said, voice rough. "No," she said, "the universe already did. I am simply telling you where you stand beneath it." I stared at my hands. They looked ordinary, human, calloused from work and cheap life, hands that had never held power, hands that now apparently could tip an empire. "This feels like manipulation," I said, her mouth curved. "It is politics. Everything in my life is manipulation, including my honesty." At least she admitted it. What do you want from me? I asked. Truly, not the council, not the summit, you. For the first time, her composure slipped. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't tears or shaking, it was a single breath that sounded tired. I want, she said, to not be alone in a room full of people who would carve pieces from me and call it duty. My chest ached unexpectedly. I want, she continued, someone beside me who does not worship my crown but respects my choices. Her eyes fixed on mine. And I want, she said, to choose you before I no longer can. The guards remained silent, but I felt their presence like gravity. This wasn't a romantic whim, this was a knife edge. I looked at her, at the plain cloak hiding someone whose name probably made entire planets kneel, and I thought of Doc 9, of the two men who had stopped fighting when I spoke gently. Sometimes stupid gentleness worked, sometimes it got you killed. Okay, I heard myself say. The word hung in the air, fragile and enormous. One of the guards stiffened. The other's helmet tilted like he couldn't decide if I was brave or suicidal. The queen didn't smile, not yet. She simply nodded once like she had signed a contract inside her own chest. Good, she said. Then we move quickly. Wait, I blurted. I said okay to what exactly? Her lips twitched. To coming with me, to standing beside me, to learning what you are agreeing to. That's not, I started. Careful, she reminded, and now the smile returned, faint and wicked. You are negotiating with a queen. Before I could protest further, she lifted her wrist. A thin band there glowed and my tablet chimed again. A document unfolded on my screen, dense with legal language, multiple languages layered and cross-referenced. My eyes skimmed the top line. Royal summons, temporary diplomatic attachment. Temporary attachment, carefully vague. You're drafting me as staff, I said. In law, she replied. In story, you will be something else. And in reality, she met my eyes. In reality, she said, you will be protected and you will protect me. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. I'm not a soldier. No, she stood and the stall seemed to widen around her as if space itself was giving her room. But you are human. That was not comforting. The guards moved. The stall flap lifted. And suddenly the market noise surged into the space like a wave. I stood on unsteady legs and followed because there was no version of my life now where I stayed behind and pretended this hadn't happened. We moved through the bazaar with a speed that turned crowds into blur. The guards walked slightly ahead, not pushing, but somehow creating a path. People stepped aside without realizing why. Instinct recognized something in their posture, an invisible warning. The queen walked beside me as if she belonged anywhere, as if the station was her hallway. What's your name? I asked because if I didn't latch onto something human, I would float away. She glanced at me. In public, you will call me your majesty. In private, a pause. Sarai, she said. The name sounded like silk over steel. Okay, I whispered, trying it like a secret. Sarai. Her eyes flickered with something like satisfaction. We reached a quiet corridor behind the market where a sleek shuttle waited, unmarked, black, too clean for a station that ran on grime and bribes. As we approached, my tablet vibrated again. Another document, non-disclosure, security clearance, medical consent. This was not a fairy tale. This was bureaucracy with teeth. The shuttle door opened without a hiss. Inside, the air smelled like cedar and ozone, filtered, expensive. I stepped in and my stomach lurched with the feeling of crossing an invisible border. As the doors sealed behind us, the Queen's guards took positions near the front, still silent. Sarai sat across from me, cloak falling open just enough that I could see the edge of her formal attire beneath, fabric threaded with faint metallic patterns that caught the light like constellations. She watched me read the documents. You can still refuse, she said quietly. I looked up. Can I? Yes, her voice held no trap. I will not force you. I cannot afford that kind of lie. That surprised me more than the crown. I swallowed. And if I say no now? Then I will return you to your life and the story will become darker. Honest again, brutal. I stared at the contract. The words blurred slightly as the shuttle lifted, gravity shifting. What happens at the summit? I asked, her jaw tightened. A treaty with the human coalition, access to medical technology we desperately need, in exchange trade corridors and research partnerships. That sounded almost normal. And the danger? She looked at me, eyes like polished metal. My world has not had an outside consort in 300 years, she said. Old blood hates change. Some of my council would rather see me dead than see me choose beyond them. My pulse hammered. Dead, she nodded once. Poison is common, assassination is art, public disgrace is weapon. I swallowed hard. So why risk it? Because our children are being born fewer each cycle, she said, and her voice finally cracked, just a hairline fracture. Because the disease in our blood is not something pride can cure, because if I do nothing, my empire becomes a museum with a flag. I didn't know what to say to that. The shuttle hummed smooth and silent, and I realized with sudden clarity that I was leaving the only life I knew for something vast and sharp. I thought of my tiny apartment, my cheap coffee, my safe loneliness. Then I thought of the Queen's tired breath in that stall. "I'll go," I said. Sarai studied me. Why? I could have lied. Would have said duty, money, adventure. Instead, I said the truth that made my chest feel exposed. "Because you asked," I said, like I was a person who could say yes or no. For a long moment, she didn't move. Then very slowly, she smiled, not practiced, not precise. "Real. Good," she said. "Then perhaps you truly are the one I chose." The shuttle's lights dimmed slightly as we entered jump alignment. A soft vibration ran through the floor like the purr of a massive animal. I gripped the seat without meaning to. Sarai leaned forward close enough that her voice became something meant only for me. "Be careful, human," she whispered again, but now it sounded less like warning and more like intimacy. "Not because I am a queen, but because the world I'm taking you to will try to make you into a symbol." Her eyes held mine. "And I need you," she said, "to stay human anyway." The jump engaged. For a heartbeat, everything stretched, sound, light, even the feeling of my own name. Then the universe snapped into a new place, and with it so did my life. We arrived above her world at dawn. From orbit, it looked like a jewel set in black velvet, deep oceans, sprawling emerald continents, and city lights that traced coastlines like glowing veins. A ring of satellites glittered around it, each one a silent witness. The shuttle docked at a private bay attached to a palace that rose from the edge of a cliff like it had grown there. White stone, dark glass, waterfalls spilling into mist. As I stepped out, the air hit me cool, clean, laced with the scent of flowering trees, and then I heard it. A low, synchronized sound, thousands of voices murmuring at once like a tide. Below the dock, a vast terrace opened onto the palace grounds. Rows of guards stood in ceremonial armor, their spears angled perfectly. Beyond them, courtiers and officials waited, arranged in careful ranks like pieces on a board. They all looked up. At her. Sarai paused at the top of the steps, cloak dropping away as if it had never belonged on her shoulders. In the daylight, she was no longer a traveler in a market stall. She was a ruler. The patterns on her clothing flared with subtle light, mapping constellations across her body. A thin crown, almost delicate, rested in her hair, but it changed everything about her face. It didn't add arrogance. It added inevitability. Her guards moved to either side. One struck the floor with the butt of his spear. The sound echoed, and the crowd below dropped to their knees as one. The tide of murmurs became a single word spoken in a language older than my translator could even render properly. But I didn't need translation. It meant majesty. My throat tightened. My knees wanted to bend out of reflex. Sarai didn't look at them. She looked at me. And then she did something that made the entire terrace go still. She extended her hand, not down to her people, to me. For a heartbeat, I thought I'd misread it. That surely she meant for someone else, a guard, a court official. Anyone trained for this, but her eyes held mine steady. "Choice," she had said. "Myth." I took her hand. Her skin was warm, her grip was firm, not fragile. She led me forward down the steps into the gaze of an empire. Whispers rippled like wind through grass. I could feel 1,000 judgments sharpening into weapons. Human, outsider, soft, mistake. Sarai's voice cut through it all. "And straight," she murmured without moving her lips. "Do not look away, let them see you." My heart hammered, but I obeyed. We reached the base of the steps. A figure in elaborate robes approached, older, face lined with authority. Their eyes flicked to me with open disdain. "Your Majesty," they said, bowing, "you return unexpectedly." Sarai's smile was calm. "Unexpectedly to you, Chancellor," she replied. The Chancellor's gaze sharpened. "And you bring a human." "Yes." The word fell like a stone in water. A murmur spread. The Chancellor's lips tightened. "May I inquire as to the purpose of this presence?" Sarai lifted my hand slightly, displaying it as if it were a royal seal. "You may inquire," she said, voice carrying, "and you may listen." She turned to the gathered crowd, and her voice rose, clear, resonant, practiced in halls that demanded obedience. "My people," she called, silence locked into place. "We stand at the edge of change," she continued. "The summit approaches, the coalition arrives. Doors of our world open." A ripple of discomfort ran through the ranks, fear, pride, anger. Sarai did not hesitate. "And so," she said, "I have made a choice." Her grip on my hand tightened just enough that I felt it. "I present to you," she declared, "the human I chose to stand beside me." The air seemed to freeze. Then from somewhere in the crowd a sharp voice rang out. "Impossible!" Another blasphemy, another political theater. My stomach dropped. My instincts screamed to step back. Sarai's posture did not change. She raised her free hand. The guard's spears struck the stone again, a thunderclap of command. Silence snapped back like a leash. Sarai's eyes swept over her court like a blade. "This is not theater," she said coldly. "This is law." She turned her head slightly toward me and her voice softened just enough. "Tell them your name," she whispered. My tongue felt heavy. My voice felt too small for this place, but I remembered what she'd asked of me: stay human anyway. I took a breath. "My name is Adam," I said, loud enough to carry. "I'm not anyone important." A ripple ran through the crowd, confusion, offense, disbelief. Sarai's lips twitched, almost amused. "And yet," she said, voice rising again, "I chose him." The Chancellor's face tightened like he'd swallowed something sour. "Your Majesty," they said carefully, the Council must learn," Sarai interrupted smoothly, "that my choices are not theirs to approve." The room, no, the entire world, felt like it tilted. Somewhere behind the Chancellor, a man in dark ceremonial armor smiled thinly. His eyes were bright with something that was not admiration, threat. Sarai noticed him too. I felt it in the way her fingers shifted against mine. "Welcome home," she murmured to me, still smiling for her people. Then, without letting go of my hand, she led me into the palace. And as the doors closed behind us, cutting off the roar of whispers, I finally exhaled. My shirt clung to my back with sweat. Sarai released my hand only once we were in a private corridor lined with tall windows and hanging gardens. She studied my face. "You spoke well," she said. "I said I wasn't important." "That," she replied, "is exactly why it worked." I let out a shaky laugh. "This is insane." "Yes," she agreed easily. "But now it is real." Footsteps echoed from around a corner, fast, purposeful. A woman in a military uniform approached, her hair braided tight, her eyes hard as cut stone. She stopped in front of Sarai and snapped into a bow that was more duty than reverence. "Your Majesty," she said, then her gaze flicked to me like I was something stuck to a boot. "So this is the human," Sarai's voice cooled. "General Kale," the general's jaw tightened. "You risked everything." "Yes," Sarai said, "that is what leadership requires." Kale's eyes narrowed. "Or what recklessness demands." Sarai's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Say what you truly mean." Kale hesitated, then spoke with blunt precision. "The council will move," she said. "They will test him, they will test you. Someone will try to kill him first." My blood turned to ice. Sarai's gaze did not waver. "I know." Kale leaned closer. "Then why bring him at all?" Sarai's voice dropped, quiet enough that only we could hear. "Because they will not expect a human to survive," she said. "And because if he does, the myth becomes stronger than their knives." Kale's gaze snapped to me again, something like reluctant respect flickering behind her skepticism. "You heard her," Kale said to me. "They'll come at you sideways, smiles, invitations, gifts, tests disguised as courtesy." I swallowed. "Great." Kale's mouth twitched. "If you want to live, don't try to be royal, don't try to be brave, just be human. It will confuse them." Sarai glanced at Kale, amused. "You are advising him to weaponize authenticity." Kale shrugged. "It's the only weapon he has." Sarai's eyes turned back to me. "And it is sharper than they think," she said. Then she stepped closer, lowering her voice. "You are in danger now," she told me without softness. "If you wish to leave, I can still arrange it, quietly, no shame." My heart hammered. The sensible part of me screamed yes. But then I remembered the way her people knelt and the way she had offered her hand to me anyway. I shook my head. "No," Sarai searched my face as if making sure the choice was real. Then very gently she nodded. "Then I will keep you alive," she said. Kale exhaled sharply. "Bold promise, Majesty," Sarai's eyes flashed. "Not a promise, a vow." That night the palace hosted a welcome feast. Kale called it what it was, a battlefield with silverware. I stood beside Sarai at a table that felt like a stage. Hundreds of eyes watched every movement, every breath, every sip of water. The food was exquisite, fruits that tasted like sunlight, meat seasoned with minerals that made my tongue tingle, but I could barely swallow. People approached in waves, offering greetings with perfectly controlled smiles. A minister with jeweled rings asked me what human cities looked like. A noblewoman with eyes like ice asked if human men were truly as emotionally volatile as rumors claimed. A scholar asked if humans really bonded with animals. Each question was a probe, a blade, a test. I answered honestly, simply refusing to be baited into arrogance or defense. Sarai watched, silent, her hand resting near mine on the table, not touching but close enough that it felt like warmth. Then came the gift. A young lord approached with a velvet box. He knelt, presenting it to Sarai. "For your chosen," he said smoothly, "a token of our acceptance." Sarai's eyes narrowed slightly. Open it. The Lord's smile tightened, but he obeyed. Inside was a slender bracelet made of black metal, engraved with symbols that my translator struggled to parse. Kale, standing behind us, went rigid. Sarai's voice became velvet-wrapped steel. What is this? The Lord's smile didn't move, but his eyes glittered. A protective charm, he lied. Kale leaned forward, voice low. That's a binding mark. Old law, it brands him as property. The room's air shifted. Courtiers pretended not to listen, but every ear was sharp. Sarai stood. The movement was small, but it silenced the hall like a blade drawn. She looked down at the kneeling Lord. You offer me a leash, she said softly. The Lord's smile faltered. Your Majesty, it is tradition. Sarai's voice cracked like thunder. Tradition, she said, is not an excuse for treason. The word treason hit the hall like a shockwave. The Lord went pale. Sarai turned, and for the first time she faced the entire court with open fury. You will not reduce him, she said, to an object to soothe your fear. She stepped closer to the Lord, and her voice dropped to a deadly whisper that still carried. If you cannot accept my choice, she said, then you will learn to fear the consequences of challenging it. The Lord trembled, sweat broke along his brow. Sarai didn't shout, she didn't rage, she simply raised her hand. The guards moved in. The Lord was lifted from the floor as if he weighed nothing. He did not resist, he could not. As he was dragged away, his eyes met mine, and in them I saw something that made my stomach twist. Not hatred, relief, as if he had done exactly what someone else wanted. Kale leaned close. First move, she murmured. Sarai sat again slowly, smoothing her clothing as if she hadn't just shattered a man's life in front of an empire. Her hand finally touched mine under the table, a brief, grounding pressure. You handled that well, she murmured. I didn't do anything. You stayed, she said simply. That is everything, my throat tightened. Was he trying to humiliate you? Yes, Sarai replied, and to see if you would run. And the someone else, Sarai's eyes flicked briefly toward a cluster of nobles, one of them the dark-armored man I'd seen earlier, watching like a predator. Soon, she said, the feast continued, but now the knives were out. I felt it in the way laughter sounded too sharp, in the way compliments carried poison underneath. Then my tablet buzzed. A message transmitted on a secure channel. Meet ME, West GARDNS. Now alone, no sender listed. Kale saw the flicker on my screen, her expression hardened. Don't, she mouthed. Sarai's gaze met mine. She didn't speak, but I understood the question behind her eyes. Choice. I swallowed, then typed a reply. Who are you? The response came instantly. If you want her to live, you'll come. My blood ran cold. I looked at Sarai. The queen who had stood in a market stall and told me she chose me. The queen who had just declared treason in front of 1,000 knives. If this was a trap, it was meant to isolate me. But if it was, I stood slowly. Sarai's eyes sharpened. Where are you going? I leaned close, whispering quickly. Someone is threatening you, West Gardens, Kale swore under her breath. Sarai's face went very still. You will not go alone, she said, voice like iron. They said alone, I whispered. Sarai's silver eyes burned. They do not get to make demands. Kale stepped forward. Majesty, let me, Sarai shook her head. If they want to lure, they will. If they want to kill, they will, but they will not separate us. My chest tightened. Sarai, she rose, and the hall quieted instinctively as if the building itself listened. My court, she announced calmly, I require air. Continue without me. No one dared object. We moved through corridors toward the gardens, Kale and a shadow team following at a distance. Sarai pretended not to see. The West Gardens were a maze of tall hedges and glowing flowers, lit by soft lanterns that floated like fireflies. Water trickled somewhere unseen. The air smelled sweet and damp. We stepped into a clearing. And there, waiting by a stone fountain, stood the dark-armored man. He didn't bow, he didn't kneel, he smiled like he owned the night. Your Majesty, he said, voice smooth. And the human, Sarai's voice was cold. Lord Verk, so he had a name. Verk's eyes glittered. I wanted to meet him without the theater. Sarai's hand drifted subtly toward the concealed weapon Kale had insisted I wear. I didn't touch it, I didn't want to escalate. Verk's smile widened. Relax, if I wanted him dead, he'd already be floating in the fountain. My stomach clenched. Sarai's voice sharpened. Then speak. Verk's gaze slid to me. Do you know why she chose you? I felt Sarai stiffen beside me. I know why she told me, I said carefully. Verk chuckled. She told you a story. Queens are good at stories. Sarai's eyes flashed. Enough. Verk held up a hand, mockingly placating. Very well, I will be direct. He stepped closer, and for the first time I saw what made him frightening. Not his armor, not his posture, his calm. The summit will make her look strong, he said. A queen with a human ally, opening doors, changing myth. The people will love it. Sarai's jaw tightened. And when the people love her, Verk continued, the council loses power, he smiled. We cannot allow that, Kale's voice snapped from the shadows. I knew it. Verk didn't even glance at her. General, still pretending loyalty is not just another weapon. Sarai's voice was lethal. Are you confessing treason in my gardens? Verk shrugged. In your gardens, yes. In the council chamber, we call it safeguarding tradition. He looked at me again. So here is the offer, human. My pulse hammered. Leave, Verk said. Return to your little station life. Take the money, take the adventure. Tell yourself you were almost important. Sarai's hand tightened around mine. I hadn't realized she'd taken it again. And if I do, I asked, voice steady only because fear had burned into focus. Verk's smile faded. Then you will die, he said simply. And she will be forced to retreat because your death will prove her choice was weakness. Sarai's voice shook with controlled fury. You will not touch him, Verk's eyes flicked to her. I won't have to, someone else will, an accident, a poison, a shameful scandal. The palace is full of ways to make fragile things break. I swallowed hard. I'm not fragile. Verk laughed, genuinely amused. You are human, you are built on soft tissue and stubbornness. That is fragile by definition. Sarai stepped forward, crown gleaming faintly. You forget, she said, that I am still your queen. Verk bowed, finally slow and mocking. Never. That is why I am giving you the chance to avoid bloodshed. Send him away, take a proper consort. Let the summit proceed without this insult. Sarai's voice became quiet. No, she said. Verk's smile vanished completely. Then you choose war. Sarai met his eyes. I choose my people's future. Verk's gaze slid to me one last time, cold now. And you choose death. Something inside me snapped, not bravado, not courage, just a deep human refusal. I stepped forward. Kale hissed my name, warning. But I looked Verk in the eye and said, you're right. Verk blinked, surprised. I'm fragile, I continued. I can die, you can kill me, anyone can. I took a breath. My hands trembled slightly, so I kept them open at my sides, palms empty. But you don't understand something about humans, I said. We're used to being the weakest thing in the room. Verk's eyes narrowed. We build anyway, I said. We love anyway, we show up anyway. I glanced at Sarai. Her eyes were bright, unreadable. Then I looked back at Verk. You're trying to win with fear, I said. So congratulations, I'm afraid. I smiled, small and real, and I'm still here. For a heartbeat, the garden went silent except for water trickling in the fountain. Verk stared at me as if I'd spoken a language he couldn't translate, then his mouth curled. Interesting, he said softly. Perhaps she chose you because you are foolish. Maybe, I said, or maybe because I'm hard to threaten. Verk's gaze hardened. He lifted his hand slightly. The hedges rustled. Shapes moved, silent, armored, emerging from the garden shadows. Assassins, my blood turned to ice. Kale's team surged forward, weapons raised. Sarai stepped in front of me without hesitation. Sarai, I shouted, her voice snapped like a command. Stay behind me. The first assassin lunged. Kale moved like lightning, intercepting, blade flashing. The garden exploded into chaos, silent violence, precise and brutal. No shouting, no dramatic speeches. Just the sickening sound of metal meeting flesh, the hiss of energy blades, the splash of water as someone hit the fountain. Verk didn't move, he watched like it was a performance. Then one assassin slipped through fast, low, heading straight for Sarai's unguarded side. I didn't think, I reacted. I shoved Sarai hard, harder than I meant to, sending her stumbling back. The assassin's blade missed her by inches and slammed into my shoulder instead. Pain tore through me like fire. My world went white. I heard Kale's shout, furious, horrified. I saw Sarai's face twist, not in fear but in something worse, rage and grief combined. The assassin tried to pull the blade free. I grabbed their wrist with my good hand and held on because if I let go the blade would come out and I'd bleed faster. My fingers were slick with blood. The assassin's helmet tilted as if surprised a human could still grip after that. Then Kale's blade took their head clean off. The body collapsed. I fell to my knees, gasping. Sarai was suddenly beside me, hands pressed to my wound, her voice sharp with command. Medic, now. Kale's team moved with terrifying efficiency, forming a protective ring. Verk finally stepped back, eyes narrowed, expression unreadable. You see, he said quietly. Fragile. Sarai looked up at him and the air around her seemed to turn cold. You attempted to kill me, she said, voice deadly calm. In my own gardens. Verk's smile flickered. I attempted to prove a point. Sarai's eyes flashed silver, bright as a blade. You have proven, she said, that you are my enemy. Verk's gaze sharpened. Do not do this, Majesty. If you move against me, the council will split. Let it, Sarai said. She stood slowly, blood on her hands, and in that moment she looked less like a queen and more like a storm wearing a crown. Then she did something that made Verk's confidence finally crack. She raised her voice, not shouting, but projecting it with the practiced power of a ruler. Witnesses, she called into the night. From the shadows beyond the clearing, figures stepped forward, servants, courtiers, guards, people who had followed the commotion. Verk's eyes widened. Sarai's gaze cut him apart. My chosen human bled for me, she declared, in full view of this palace. She looked down at me, her expression fierce and tender all at once. He stood beside me, she said, and he did not run. She turned back to the crowd. This, she announced, is what choice looks like. This is what loyalty looks like. This is what the future looks like. Her eyes swept across them, and I felt the weight of myth settling into place. Let anyone who would challenge my choice, she said, remember this blood. Verk's face went pale, not from fear of punishment, no, from fear of story, because stories were harder to kill than people. Medics rushed in, hands lifted me carefully. The pain made my visions swim. As they carried me away, I looked back. Sarai stood in the garden with blood on her hands, staring at Verk like a verdict. He backed away slowly, realizing too late that his attack had done exactly what she wanted. It had turned me into proof, and it had turned her choice into law. I woke in a white room that smelled like antiseptic and flowers. My shoulder burned, but the pain was distant, muffled by medication. Sarai sat beside my bed, no crown, no cloak, just her in simple clothes, hair loose, eyes tired. When she saw my eyes open, she exhaled like she'd been holding her breath for days. You're alive, she whispered. Disappointing, I know, I rasped. Her mouth twitched, then her face crumpled just slightly, not tears, not weakness, just the fragile edge of emotion she usually kept locked away. You shouldn't have done that, she said. I shoved you, I replied. That was extremely disrespectful, Your Majesty. She let out a shaky laugh, and it sounded painfully human. I chose you, she said softly, and you immediately start throwing me around. I'm consistent, I murmured. Her fingers touched my uninjured hand, gentle this time. Verk's faction moved too soon, she said. They revealed themselves. Because of me? Yes, her eyes held mine, and because of you, I swallowed. What happens now? Sarai's gaze turned distant, calculating. Now the council cannot pretend. Now my people have seen blood. Now the summit will happen with the world watching, and no one can claim you are a puppet. They will call you foolish or brave or reckless. She looked back at me, silver eyes steady. But they will not call you weak, she said. My throat tightened. I didn't do it to be strong. I know, she replied. That is why it matters. She leaned closer, voice low. Be careful, human, she whispered again, but now it carried warmth. Not because I am dangerous, her gaze softened. But because you are becoming important to me. My chest ached more than my wound. I didn't want to be important, I admitted. Sarai smiled faintly. Neither did I. Silence settled between us, gentle for the first time. Outside the window, her world glowed with dawn. Somewhere beyond the palace walls, an empire shifted, stories rewriting themselves around a single act of stupid gentleness. I squeezed her hand carefully. Okay, I said. So what's my job now, besides getting stabbed? Sarai's smile turned sharp again, queenly and alive. Now, she said, you stand beside me at the summit. I groaned softly. That sounds worse than getting stabbed. She laughed, a real laugh, bright enough to make the sterile room feel warmer. It will be, she agreed, but you will not be alone. She rose, and for a moment I saw the queen again, the posture, the gravity, the inevitability. Then she looked down at me and the mask slipped just enough. I chose you, she said, voice quiet and certain. And now, she added, we choose the future together. In that moment, despite the fear and the pain and the looming knives, I believed her. Because for the first time in a long time, the universe wasn't just happening to me. I had made a choice, and I was still here.